Hello and welcome to the Wednesday check-in here on Landy's Crypto Corner, where we take a look at Bitcoin on the daily, sometimes lower term timeframes, but usually higher term timeframe price action as it relates to our Macro Monday video. So we are going to follow up with where we left off with on Bitcoin on Monday. You can see that Bitcoin has hit the first major downside target area now, nearly directly. In fact, it's pretty darn close there. So I'd mentioned, if Bitcoin was going to put in a high, we would see it occur on closes below. Hold on one second. Let's turn the magnet on so I can actually get the real price there. I'd mentioned that it would be on closes below the $62,000 area. We did see price kind of try to hang around there on Tuesday, and then Wednesday it just dropped straight down to the next level. In some lower term timeframes, it did try to hold itself up in the expected areas around 61.8, but after losing, that 62.8 and losing the lower term time frame level of 61.8 or so, it was right down to our 60,263 here. And I usually call this the 60,000 to 60,300 area, depending on your chart. But here on Coinbase Spot, I think didn't it tag it directly? No, it kind of went a little bit below it there at 60,255. Tough to see as a couple $100 off of this low there of yesterday, and even coming back down to retest it today. It's a little difficult to see on the daily candles, but we can drop down the time frames and kind of evaluate things, as I do think this is very important. You might remember that on Monday I mentioned keep your eyes on this low. If we start seeing $60,000 and under, even in lower term time frames, keep an eye on the 59,825 low. And that's because if we do see a daily close below there, if we haven't already seen a move down to the top side of the risk zone here at 58.4, then we likely will. All right, so again, let me say that 59,825, even lower term timeframes below 60K or so, we're looking to that level, right? Around that low at 59,825. If we see any closures below there, I'll be looking to the 58.4 level first in the lower term time frames, and then see how that holds up on the daily. But that's only if it isn't already hit. So for instance, if we see a wick through 59.8 and that hits that 58.4 and pops back up above it, fine, that's okay. This would be and this is now a lower high. That would definitely be a swing down trend, but we have a lower high in place. And if we do see any closes below 59,825, then we're looking at a lower low. So lower high, lower low structure. That is a trend reversal. It is not a completed trend, but you see every time Bitcoin's tried to complete either an uptrend or a downtrend, it has had some trouble doing so. We had the lower high, higher low to higher high, higher low, which should be full trend. I'd mentioned it wasn't because of the way that volatility was positioned in terms of Bollinger Bands as it related to the overhead horizontal levels of support and resistance. But in this case, we always start out with trend. We have now a higher low to lower high. Any kind of closes below 59,825 would be a lower low, thus a trend reversal set up for further downside. Now, if we did see 58,400 close below especially, then we have to look over to this, excuse the kids in the background, 57,500. If we do see any closes below there, or if price is going to head below there in the lower term timeframes, then the next big area of interest is going to be around, the 55,850 level here, which is the close open over here, where we did see that 53.5 low come in. This was the second major downtrend of the range. Now, if Bitcoin can remain above 60K, 60,300 on a closing basis, then, what does it have to do? Well, on the daily, it's got to, look left, 61.8 to 62.8 over here. It's got to be recovered in those lower term time frames. And then we need to see 63.8 recovered on a closing basis. And now to break this lower high, we need to see a close above 64,467 in this case. So around 64,500. Then we can start looking at 65 in the lower term timeframes, but realistically, the bigger level here, well, 65 is a big level. It's a macro level from the first major high in 2021, but 65.5 is the relevant area to this 66,550. Above there, I'd be looking at 67,272. That is the first major lower high of the first downtrend here. Hey, Landy, there's lower highs up here. Yes, but this was in the context of an uptrend. We had the big trend break to the downside, and then the lower high that kicked off the reversal to the lower low structure down here at 56.5. So first lower high, 67,272. We saw daily resistance off of this higher low structure to come back and retest. Price was using this area as support, double top at 72. We had the first lower high of the second major downtrend of the range here. Where to try to sit? On the first major lower high of the first major downtrend. It then popped down through it and retested it bearishly perfectly before this next downtrend resumed. So if price was to break above 67,272, I will tell you that is very significant, especially on a close, not just a wick. We need to see a close above there. And then we're looking essentially 68 to 70 up here, which is this first major lower high of the second major downtrend. And you'll note that on the third major downtrend, well, what did we get? We had this little uptrend. So we had our first major downtrend, second major downtrend. We had the big sell-off here. So we had this uptrend and then a giant trend break to lower high, higher low, higher high. This is actually a structural change, right? And this was the first lower high here was an area of interest and is going to remain an area of interest now that price is below it as at least local overhead resistance. Now, in this case, we had a bit of a change of structure right into a higher low, higher high structure, right? So we had a big trend break to a trend reversal setup to a higher low to a trend reversal setup confirmation on the bullish side. So we had a trend reversal setup on the bearish side, trend reversal setup on the bullish side here, but no continuation. Big dump off to break that shorter term time frame uptrend. And then we had a 4-part trend to hit full trend, but then a lower high. So what is this telling me? This tells me that, ever since we had the two big major downtrends here, we had that big sell-off and spike down to $49,000, which was the ETF high from back in January before Bitcoin went down and tested a monthly at 38.5 and then popped all the way back up here. Well, in this case, this is a change of structure and a change of character. Even in some longer term timeframes, like I pointed out on the weekly, we have a downtrend break in place. I need to see at minimum another swing higher low or a closing higher low. We'll get to that in just a moment to revisit it. But what this is telling me is, we just looked at trend. We talked about support and resistance. What this is telling me is that we're in compression to possible re-expansion. Now, where does re-expansion occur? You might be thinking, oh no, it closed below the lower first here. We're starting to see downside expansion of the Bollinger Bands. And you'd be right. If Bitcoin does lose, the 60,263 drops the low here. Excuse me. Drops the low here at 59,825 and specifically closes again below the lower second. I'd be looking for pretty decent expansion to the downside. The lower second is currently at 59,500. Now, what I will tell you is lower seconds, if they're not closed below, they act as reversal points. And same goes for if they're not closed above, they act as reversal points at the extremes. If you see closures below, that's where we get aggressive expansion to the downside. That's where we start targeting 58.4. Now, that's where, if we do see this low dropped and a wick down through, but no close below the lower second, we could see 58.4 be tested. But it's closes below the lower second, then we'd look for expansion down there if we didn't already see a wick down there at 58.4, and then probably a price replace band shortly under there, just under there is what I meant to say, right by this low at 57.5 where the lower third is coming in. If that area is dropped, then we're looking further down to that 55,850. So just be aware of that. Anywhere below there, we'd look for continuation of expansion below a major level of support down to that 53.5. Note that we have not gotten any closes below that 53.5, that second major downtrend's wick low or swing low, if you will. Same goes for the upside, by the way. Back above the lower first here at 61,150 in this case. Does this line up with any important areas? It starts to paint that it's going to, likely test 61.8 at minimum, possibly even to 62.8, where you will note that the basis band is starting to come in. Above there, we looked at 63.8, and then right around that upper first, we have this lower high now from Monday, and that is at 64,500. Anywhere above there, we're looking to that 65.5 to the upper second, which just so happens to be right around this higher high structure at 66,550. Closes above there, I'd look for expansion up into 67,272. Above there, the upper third, likely a price replace band around 68,270 on more aggressive expansion, especially if Bitcoin is trending outside of or above, in this case, the upper second. We start looking for aggressive expansion up into the run the high zone, and then above there 70 to 72, and then 72 to the all-time high and higher at that 73,835. Now to the downside, we would be looking for that expansion, to especially on closes below, trending expansion down into our support structures there. There's not too much more to say in that regard. This isn't a setup that's telling me that it's going to expand right now. BBWP is not up over the moving average, but I can tell you that danger if we start losing this low and start testing below that lower second standard deviation at 59,500. It's actually 400, 59,400 as price kind of oscillates around. Then essentially we have to keep eyes on the daily possibly closing below there and then expanding down into the next support level at 58,400 if it didn't already. All right, so got that out of the way. Let's go ahead and look at, we talked about trend, support and resistance, volatility. Let's talk about momentum. Oh, and another thing, this indicator is a triple band set. It's Bollinger Bands. You can get this indicator for free in the bit.ly link in my description of my profile on X, or in the link in the video's description down below. Let's talk about how those first three, trend, support and resistance, and volatility, create momentum. Well, in this case, we can take a look at momentum and see that this is a regular Stoke. This has a bunch of other bells and whistles on it. You don't need it. You can just search reverse Stoke in the indicators tab up here and pick up reverse Stoke with pivots. We can see that the pivot number is going to be $62,000. We have an initial cross to the downside. So if today's candle, this being the Thursday candle, I'm still Wednesday for me. But if the Thursday candle closes below $62,000, this will confirm a full trend shift. But again, we need to see the other criteria, right? That low being dropped to 59,825. And then subsequently, we're looking for some lower prices. But on a close, this could shift back to the downside in the context of the bearish control zone for a regular Stoke. Again, this is not a Stoke RSI. This is measuring close over close price momentum. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to some higher term time frame stuff. This is also, this isn't quite the setup that the bears would want, but I mean, if it starts dropping that low, then it will be the one they want. 2-day, 2 days kind of ugly. This is ready to paint a 2-day lower high. And it did not set the higher. It technically set a higher low, but remember, I wanted to see above 63.5 for the 2-day, and that was brutally rejected around the upper set of bands here. Closing back below the basis on the 2 days, looking like it wants to come back down and test the low there, that higher low in the daily, and this technical higher low swing and close structure on the 2-day here, and it closes below there. We're looking at a range essentially back down to 58.4, then just under there to, guess what, the lower first, lining up with that daily higher low down there at 57.5. Anywhere below there, and we start looking to the lower bands. So bulls from the 2-day perspective, the kids are having a little bit of fun out there. From the 2-day time frame perspective, you need to see Bitcoin closing back above the upper first here, and that's exactly at 63.8. So I want to pull something up here on the weekly. I mentioned this on Monday, but let's go ahead and actually look at let's check on some other higher term time frames. 3-day, it's right on the basis. 4-day. Is that going to be closing? Yeah, so 4 days going to be closing with the 2-day as well. So yeah, below the basis band, don't want to see that, but it's a range. Guess what? 58.4 down to 57.300 for the lower first there would be below that low. Anywhere below there, you can see where the lower second is at the extreme side of things at 53.5. To the upside, basically above 63.8 to 64K, top side of the recover zone. Then we're looking for it to possibly test up to that pivot zone, which is really like around 65.5 to 67.272, and even encompassing just shy of $68,000 above that. Let's look at the 5-day. What's the 5-day looking like? 5 days right at the basis band, actually testing right on it right now, but that has 2 days to go. Let's go back to this weekly here. So I want to talk about the weekly. We're going to check the monthly again so that I can make something very, very clear to everyone that has been asking me this. But weekly structure, again, excuse me, higher high close, closed above this lower high, got a higher high close, but remember it's coming off of a lower low close. So higher high close, lower low close with a higher low swing. What does Landy want to see? Landy wants to see at minimum a higher low swing. Like, let's say, it may not be very likely, but we'll see throughout the rest of this week. But let's say that 59,825 is the higher low swing, and then we see closes back above 65,550. I would accept that as a higher low structural change on the weekly. Or we see a closing higher low. Closes like this, remains inside the wick, takes out this week's high next week, and then we get a higher low close and a higher low swing locked in. Or it comes down and maintains higher low structure above here at that 52.5, and we see another higher low swing. Then I would be looking for this high to be broken at 66,550. But I would prefer to see a closing higher low as it relates to this 54,881 close open lower low on the weekly. So what do we need to see? At minimum, higher low on a swing, or a nice closing candle structure, higher low, that takes out that 66,550 now. That would be very bullish. I'd be looking back to the highs and then subsequently higher over time. Keep in mind that the weekly pivot for Stoke is at $55,000. So price has some freedom to move on the weekly and lower time frames. But more importantly, I want to talk about this monthly because I keep getting questions about it. And I just so happened to be talking to Benny on our Chop and Chart spaces earlier. By the way, got a chance to talk to, before that space started, got a chance to talk to Scott Page. That was a lot of fun. Scott Page of Pink Floyd, Supertramp, Toto fame, and of, software development fame for me, in addition to music. Got to talk to him, myself, Goyoza from Nat Monkeys, and Stuart, who many of you might know from the 100 Day. We got a chance to hang out with him and many other builders in the space, and it was a lot of fun. So if you have a chance, go on the timeline and listen to that. That was a lot of fun. But after I dipped out of that a little bit early, as I did have a previous engagement that was from a while back, for those wondering, with Benny for Chop and Charts. And we chopped up some charts, and I mentioned this monthly to him because I wanted to point this out. I wasn't sure if I had pointed it out to him yet. But the last higher low on the monthly for Bitcoin is still the $25,000 wick low. I've seen people starting to call this $49,000 swing a higher low on the monthly. It's not confirmed, right? So the last higher low is at $25,000, just shy of that. It's $24,900, with the close open on the monthly for spot price coming in just shy of $26,000. This is the last monthly higher low. All right, I highly doubt that we are going to see any structural break. Now, because there is no higher low structure in place here on the monthly, In the lower term timeframes, there's a nice swing low structure there in a major area at 49,000. But from the monthly chart, this is just a downtrend. A nice pullback to areas of support that kind of got front run here at the 48,240 from the bear market lower high. But this also means that until we see this swing solidified as a higher low swing, and then of course we have to see that followed by a higher low close, well, where would that occur? Technically speaking, there's two areas where you'll see that populate on most indicators, and then the technical, the area that I want to see. Technically closes back above 64,609 would, oh, hey, look at that. That area was just rejected this month. So we rejected the open from August. Well, that's the area that we would need to see close above on the monthly to solidify this swing at $49,000 as a higher low. And that would also paint a closing higher low structure. Now, I would say additional criteria is you would need to see closes above 66,550 as a rule for me in particular to actually start looking for price to appreciate to the upside. And that would be probably pretty much it. Higher low and then boom is likely what would happen, but we would still need to see how it reacted around the highs. And on the monthly, that's at 71,300 to that 73,835 or this zone up here. So that is what we would need to see. Otherwise, to be quite honest, until we see a higher low structure on the monthly, downside's kind of in the game, at least sideways and down. If we do start to see the dailies and then weeklies closing above at minimum 64,600 and then taking out that 66,550, which was just the high that was just put in, the most recent higher high on the daily, until we see that, and then it's coming into the end of the month and we start seeing closes above there. Until we see that, I'm not looking too much higher. I'm looking for sideways price action, consolidations, washouts to both the upside and downside. And downside is still in the cards, right? Because this is a pullback in the context of the monthly. And, realistically, it's been since April. So we've had a good 6 months, 5.5, 6 months of sideways and down, which is exhausting a lot of people in these markets. But quite honestly, I think this is a bigger deal than many are giving it. Many are getting exhausted and frustrated when this is a big, big deal because this is a big, big structure that's being built. And I'm telling you right now, Landy is not looking for this higher low structure to get taken out. And we're going to bring up my last point here. Main reason why is on the accumulation distribution chart. You see that minor electrical cost down there at 42,200 inside of a major area, right at this doji, by the way, 42.5 down to 38.5, which, by the way, is this closing low structure that set the swing low. Did fail to set the closing low, though. But this was what was struck to the downside just post ETF launch after the $49,000 high was put in. We had that 38.5 run back. Well, right at the top side of that zone, at worst, in my opinion, is where we would find Bitcoin, even in a big, big, big flash crash scenario. Now, if we start to see price trending down, that could adjust, and then that's why it's a zone. Actually, let me bring that back up. That's why that's a zone. So if price was just slowly work its way down there in a trend on, again, that resumes the weekly downtrend, obviously that would imply that the daily's downtrending and all the time frames in between, then I could likely see this, coming down a bit further. And that's why it's in this big target 3 of distribution, which would be a retest of the ETF sell-off, from 49 to 38.5 on that test, which again is that that close open on the monthly, which, by the way, was perfectly tested on the top side, from the bottom side here in November of last year, and then tested on the top side as support. Pin, beautiful. And then what do? We pin the top side of that ETF highs. It's beautiful. I know it's a little tough to see on this chart, but I wanted to point out the electrical cost. And there's another major thing that we should look at, and that is exchange flows. And let's go ahead and take a look at the exchange reserves. And let's just admire this for a moment. For context, this was the ETF high. Okay. On a close, this was the ETF highs, just right into the ETFs, and then we sold off to the lows. Now this is measuring closing price, right? You'll notice that we did get, price appreciating quickly as Bitcoin is being removed from exchanges. But then we see this sideways chop, and look at the exchange reserves for Bitcoin. Down, down, down. And then I'm going to leave you actually with this. So I keep saying I'm going to leave you, but now I'm actually going to leave you. Just take a look at this, where we are now for exchange reserves, and compare that. Just we're seeing a bit of a structural change, by the way. And then compare that to like the last time that we saw exchange reserves here at it's 2,568,000, something like that. Well, the last time that we saw that, it was in 2018. So it's been a little over 6 years now. And that's bonkers. This has also been one of the steepest drawdowns that we've seen in quite a while. We saw a sharp drawdown right after the March of 2020 flash crash for Bitcoin before it recovered in a couple of days and normalized. We saw the big drawdown, and then we started to test the 2019 highs, and then boom, we saw movement back onto exchanges. So again, that's something to pay attention to. This is telling us everything we need to know. Bull run has not happened, and it is definitely loading. All right. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.